In Hollywood, stories are often scripted. Every word, every image, every moment is carefully shaped for the audience. But sometimes, the real drama doesn't happen on a movie set. It happens in courtrooms, in private messages, and behind the closed doors of people the world thinks they already know. Blake Lively has always been seen as one of the few untouchable stars of her generation, graceful, elegant, and far removed from scandal. Yet over the past year, her name has been pulled into a legal storm that has forced the entertainment world to confront a question it rarely asks out loud. How much truth survives when power and reputation are at stake? Her legal team has filed what's called a spoliation claim. In simple terms, they are accusing another party, in this case actor and director Justin Baldoni, of destroying or hiding critical evidence. That evidence, they say, could have revealed what really went on during the making of a film both stars were involved in. But the story isn't just about missing messages. It's about the silence between them and what that silence might mean. According to court filings, Justin Baldoni's team used encrypted messaging apps, such as Signal, where messages can disappear seconds after being read. To Blake's lawyers, that is not a coincidence. They claim the messages were intentionally erased, removing key conversations that could have changed the outcome of the case. Baldoni's lawyers deny this entirely. They argue that there was no evidence because there was never any wrongdoing. In their view, the accusation itself is built on assumption, not proof. In Hollywood, perception often matters more than evidence. As the courtroom exchanges intensified, accusations began to fly in every direction. Blake's team accused Justin's lawyers of hiding behind legal privilege, the right to keep communications between a client and their attorney private. They argued that this shield was being used to block the truth. The defense countered that it was simply the law. The result has been a standoff that feels less like a trial and more like a chess match, where every move carries the risk of career-ending consequences. One piece of evidence has captured more attention than anything else, a set of text messages, now known as Exhibit 29. The messages surfaced after months of legal digging, offering a small but powerful glimpse into what was happening behind the scenes during the release of It Ends With Us in August 2024. In these messages, two people involved in the project, Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Eel, discuss how well the film was performing despite the growing controversy. Melissa reportedly wrote, "Numbers don't lie, 50 million at the box office." On the surface, it was good news, but what came next changed the tone completely. The conversation suggested that Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, wanted Justin Baldoni to release a public apology, a written statement that would effectively make him take responsibility for the problems surrounding the movie's production. It was a bold request, and one that could alter how the public saw him. The message describing this plan ended with a warning: career killer for them in Wayfair. Lawyer up now. Those words marked a turning point. Justin's team saw the request not as a peace offering, but as a trap. Signing or releasing such a statement could be seen as an admission of guilt, something that could follow him into every future project, every headline, and every negotiation. Baldoni refused to release the statement. For Blake's side, that refusal became part of their argument. They saw it as a sign that he had something to hide. For Justin's team, it was simply a matter of self-preservation. In their view, no innocent person should be forced to apologize for something they didn't do. The truth, however, remains buried somewhere between the two versions. And like many Hollywood controversies, the public is left guessing who to believe. On one side is an actress known for her composure and intelligence, surrounded by a powerful legal team. On the other, a director trying to protect his name in an industry where reputation is everything. What makes this story more than a celebrity feud is what it reveals about the world we live in now, a world where evidence can disappear with a tap, where private messages can become courtroom weapons, and where silence can be twisted into guilt. Technology doesn't just connect people. It also protects them, hides them, and sometimes exposes them. The deeper question hiding inside Blake Lively's case isn't just about who said what. It's about how easily truth can vanish. When the story of a conflict depends on what's left in someone's inbox, how can anyone ever know what really happened? This case has turned into something far bigger than a dispute between two Hollywood figures. It's become a reflection of modern accountability, a test of how far someone will go to defend their version of the truth. And as more documents are filed, more statements are leaked, and more people pick sides online, one fact becomes painfully clear. In today's world, the core of public opinion is just as powerful as any judge or jury. Behind the headlines and social media debates, this is the real story, one of control, secrecy, and perception. It shows how even the most admired people can become caught in the machinery of fame and the relentless hunger for proof. The glamorous world that once seemed so far away now feels uncomfortably close to our own, because at its heart, this isn't just a story about celebrities. It's a story about how fragile truth has become in the age of vanishing messages and curated realities. As Hollywood struggled with its own crisis of truth and image, another world, one built on competition, loyalty, and billions of dollars, began to crack under similar pressure. The world of basketball, long celebrated for its athletic brilliance and human stories of triumph, suddenly found itself caught in a scandal that went far beyond the court. It began quietly, with whispers among sports analysts and gambling regulators. There were bets being placed that didn't make sense. Not just the usual wagers, but ones that seemed impossibly precise, predicting exact plays, foul counts, and even how specific players would perform under certain conditions. What seemed like luck soon started to look like inside knowledge. As the numbers piled up, the FBI took notice. What they uncovered was a vast and carefully hidden sports betting network stretching across states and continents. Behind the screens and betting apps was a web of people, gamblers, intermediaries, and even former players, all connected in ways that revealed how vulnerable the game had become to manipulation. Investigators discovered that confidential team information, like player injuries and pre-game strategies, was being quietly leaked and used to place high-stakes bets. The sums were staggering. Millions were flowing through offshore accounts and coded digital transactions, hidden in plain sight. For a sport that had always prided itself on fairness and integrity, the revelations hit like a thunderclap. Fans who had grown up believing in the purity of the game were stunned. They had cheered for heroes, not hustlers. To them, basketball was a sacred place where talent, not deceit, decided the outcome. The idea that someone could influence a game from the shadows felt like a betrayal of everything the sport stood for. The news spread fast, consuming talk shows and social media feeds. But it wasn't until one voice spoke up that the scandal truly hit home. Shaquille O'Neal, one of basketball's most respected legends, decided to address the controversy directly. His words carried the kind of weight that only comes from experience and a deep love for the game. In a podcast episode that quickly went viral, Shaq spoke softly but firmly. He said that when you lose your integrity, you lose everything. Money, fame, and trophies mean nothing if the foundation beneath them is rotten. He reminded everyone listening that trust is what makes a game beautiful, the belief that every shot, every win, and every loss is real. Without that, there's no meaning left. It wasn't a lecture. It was a confession of care, the kind that comes from someone who has seen what success can do to people. He talked about how temptation has always been part of sports, how athletes are constantly surrounded by people offering shortcuts, easy cash, or fame without consequence. But every shortcut comes with a price. Every secret bet chips away at something bigger than money, the soul of the game itself. The FBI's findings grew more disturbing as the investigation continued. This wasn't just a few rogue gamblers. It was an organized network built with precision and secrecy. Some of the people involved were veterans of the sport, men who once felt the rush of the crowd and couldn't let it go. For them, the thrill of betting became a substitute for the glory they had lost. The addiction wasn't only to money, it was to relevance. Federal agents traced encrypted messages, suspicious transfers, and coded signals used during live games. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became that the corruption had been quietly spreading for years, right under everyone's noses. Every revelation sent shockwaves through the basketball community. Teams issued statements. The league promised reform, but the damage was already done. Trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. Older fans, who remember the golden age of the NBA, were left disillusioned. They remembered the purity of rivalry, Magic and Bird, Jordan and his era of dominance. For them, the game was about pride and hard work. Now it seemed driven by hidden motives and unseen money. The younger generation, growing up in an age of online betting and influencer culture, viewed the scandal differently, as another reminder of how blurred the lines between sports, business, and entertainment have become. What makes this story even more unsettling is how it mirrors what's happening in Hollywood. Two worlds that seem so different, film and sports, are now wrestling with the same demons: secrecy, manipulation, and the chase for control. In both places, the truth has become negotiable, reshaped by whoever can tell the story first and loudest. Shaquille's closing words in that podcast stayed with people long after recording ended. He said, "This isn't just about basketball. It's about honor. When you trade that for a bet, you've already lost." The scandal became more than just a headline. It became a warning, a sign that even in the most celebrated places, the movie set, the basketball court, the podium, corruption can quietly take root when integrity is treated as optional. And like in Hollywood, once the story breaks, it's not just careers that fall apart. It's trust. As investigators continue to follow the money and the messages, one truth began to emerge. Whether in entertainment or in sports, the real danger isn't fame, power, or even greed. It's the belief that no one will ever find out, because sooner or later, they always do. While these scandals may seem worlds apart, one unfolding in the heart of Hollywood, the other in the roaring arenas of the NBA, they share a common thread. Both expose how modern fame, money, and influence can twist even the most admired institutions into something unrecognizable. What we're seeing is not just a fall of individuals, but the quiet decay of trust in the stories we've always believed. In Hollywood, a missing message can alter reputations overnight. In sports, a single bet can undo decades of loyalty. But the real force tying these stories together is the media, the machine that takes whispers, reshapes them into headlines, and feeds them back to a world hungry for drama. Once a story begins to spin, truth becomes a matter of perception. The louder version often wins. When Blake Lively's court filings surfaced, social media exploded. Screens lit up with speculation, gossip, and edited clips taken out of context. Thousands of users began piecing together theories like detectives, convinced they had uncovered the truth. But in reality, few understood what was actually happening inside the courtroom. Every new post blurred the lines further, turning legal complexity into viral entertainment. The same pattern unfolded in the basketball scandal. Within hours of the FBI announcement, hashtags were trending, podcasts were speculating, and online personalities were breaking down exclusive details that hadn't even been confirmed. Overnight, what had once been a serious investigation transformed into content, bite-sized narratives designed to be shared, debated, and monetized. In both cases, the media became the battlefield. Every outlet wanted to be first, not necessarily right. A headline's goal was no longer clarity, but reaction. The louder the outrage, the better the engagement. For viewers, it became difficult to separate fact from exaggeration. People weren't reading court documents or FBI statements. They were watching edited clips, reading selective quotes, and forming opinions on fragments of truth. This is the world we now live in, a place where truth competes with virality. A place where the narrative you see depends entirely on who's telling it and how much attention they want from you. For a generation raised on social feeds and short attention spans, nuance has become optional. The question isn't what's real, but what feels real. In the Blake Lively case, a carefully worded filing can spark days of debate. A single screenshot, stripped of context, can be treated as proof. Meanwhile, the people involved, human beings with emotions, fears, and reputations, become characters in a story they can no longer control. Every photo, every interview, every reaction is analyzed for meaning, even when there may be none. The same phenomenon has overtaken professional sports. The NBA gambling scandal became more than a crime story. It became a narrative about betrayal, greed, and lost glory. Commentators turned athletes into cautionary tales. Fans turned disappointment into outrage. And just like in Hollywood, the truth slowly drowned beneath the noise of speculation. Shaquille O'Neal's words, calm and deliberate, stood out because they were a rare moment of sincerity in a storm of chaos. He reminded people that honor doesn't trend. It doesn't get millions of views. But it's the only thing that keeps institutions like sports, media, and entertainment from collapsing under their own weight. His reflection became the emotional anchor in a time when most people were looking for someone to blame. What makes these stories so powerful and so dangerous is how easily they feed into each other. The public sees one celebrity fall and assumes the next one must be guilty too. Scandals become serial dramas, each episode promising another downfall, another confession, another piece of someone's private life laid bare for consumption. The media no longer reports events. It manufactures momentum. It keeps people watching, scrolling, and talking. But in doing so, it also fuels a deeper kind of damage, the erosion of empathy. Every scandal becomes entertainment. Every mistake becomes a meme. The human cost fades behind performance. Buried beneath all the noise, there's a simple, unsettling truth. Whether at a courtroom in Los Angeles or a basketball court in Miami, every one of these stories begins with a decision, a choice made in private, often out of fear, pride, or desperation. It's in those moments that careers are lost, trust is broken, and history quietly changes course. For decades, Hollywood and sports were symbols of escape worlds where people could believe in heroes, victories, and redemption. Now they become mirrors, reflecting back our own obsession with exposure and downfall. The more we watch, the more we demand. And in the process, we forget that the same hunger that builds stars also destroys them. The question that remains is not who's guilty or innocent, but what we become as an audience. Are we still looking for truth or just the next headline that feels exciting enough to distract us for a while? Scandals fade, cases close, and the noise dies down. But the damage left behind, to reputations, to trust, and the truth itself takes far longer to heal. Somewhere behind the lights and headlines, another story is already beginning. For most of the 20th century, fame was a carefully protected illusion. Studios, sports leagues, and record labels all operated like fortresses, controlling what the public saw and hiding what they didn't want known. Every star had a polished image, every athlete a flawless record. The audience believed what they were shown, and that belief was sacred. But the world has changed. Social media has replaced the studio system. The press no longer asks for access. It takes it. Every phone in every hand has become a camera, a microphone, and a public courtroom. This new age doesn't forgive easily. It doesn't wait for context. It doesn't care for patience or due process. A rumor can now do what no jury ever could: destroy a legacy before sunrise. Blake Lively's legal battle is just one example in a long list of public unravelings. It's no longer enough to win your case in court. You also have to win the battle of perception online. The hashtags, the reaction videos, the exclusive leaks form a second trial, one where the jury is made up of millions of strangers scrolling in bed at 2 a.m. Unlike a real court, there's no appeal, no cross-examination, no end date. In the NBA scandal, it's no different. Athletes once celebrated as heroes are now cast as villains overnight. Their faces, once plastered on billboards, now appear in mugshots, thumbnails, and tabloid covers. The same fans who once cheered for them are the first to share their downfall not out of hatred, but out of habit. Outrage has become entertainment. Entertainment, in our time, has become a form of addiction. Algorithms feed us what keeps our pulse racing: conflict, betrayal, downfall, revenge. It's the same cycle, repeating with different faces, different scandals, different names. As long as there's someone to fall, the audience will always be ready to watch. Beneath the surface, something far more tragic is happening. We are losing our sense of proportion, the ability to see the difference between accountability and annihilation. The culture that once believed in redemption now only believes in exposure. We don't want people to change. We want them to vanish. In the past, mistakes were lessons. Today, they're life sentences. One wrong post, one private message, one misunderstood interaction, and a lifetime of work can be erased. And the cruelest part? Most of the people watching, judging, and sharing would never survive the same level of scrutiny themselves. It raises a haunting question. Are we really holding others accountable, or are we simply addicted to the thrill of watching someone else's world burn, while ours remains untouched? For the older generation, those who grew up in a world where privacy was respected and reputations mattered, this transformation feels almost unrecognizable. Gossip lived in whispers, not headlines. News anchors spoke with restraint, not urgency. An accusation needed evidence before it became a story. Now, evidence is optional. Emotion is enough. And that shift has changed everything. In Blake Lively's case, what should have remained a matter for the courtroom has become a social spectacle. Her every move is analyzed, her motives dissected, her words replayed in slow motion for views and reactions. While lawyers trade filings and motions, the real trial unfolds online, a place where reason rarely wins. For the NBA, a league built on pride and integrity, the scandal marks more than a legal failure. It's a cultural one. The moment gambling crossed into the sacred space of sport, the purity of the game itself was questioned. Fans began to wonder, if scores can be bought, what else can? If truth can be hidden, who's left to trust? This question echoes far beyond basketball or Hollywood. It touches every corner of modern life, where visibility has replaced virtue. We live in a time where exposure feels like justice and silence feels like guilt. But the truth, more often than not, lives somewhere in between. In that quiet space between headlines and hashtags lies a humanity we keep forgetting to see. History moves in cycles. We build up our heroes, and then we tear them down. We glorify success until success becomes a target. And in that endless back and forth, something vital gets lost: perspective. The difference now is that the cycle has no pause button. The internet never sleeps, and the story never ends. But maybe it's not too late to remember what real truth sounds like, not the kind that trends, but the kind that endures. For every downfall, there's always a question that lingers afterward. What happens next? When the noise fades, when a hashtag stops trending, and when the audience moves on to the next headline, what remains of the people left behind? Rebuilding after public destruction has never been easy. In this new world, it's nearly impossible. The internet remembers everything. A rumor deleted still lives in screenshots. A mistake corrected still circulates out of context. The digital world never forgives it archives. Yet some manage to rise again, not because the public suddenly remembers their goodness, but because they learn to live beyond the audience. They stop chasing approval and start reclaiming identity. That's the quiet revolution beneath all the chaos, a return to authenticity in a culture that rewards performance. In Blake Lively's case, authenticity has always been her armor. Behind the glamour, she's understood how to balance Hollywood delusion with real human depth. Now, faced with the most difficult chapter of her career, that balance is being tested. Her court filings may make headlines, but her silence outside them speaks louder. It's the silence of someone who knows that truth doesn't need to shout. In sports, the NBA, rocked by scandal and betrayal, is learning a painful lesson about trust. The league that once stood as a symbol of unity and resilience now faces the challenge of proving its integrity all over again. Signs of hope exist, veterans speaking out, younger players demanding transparency, fans calling for accountability rather than blind loyalty. The wounds are deep, but so is the desire to heal. Shaquille O'Neal's calm reflection was not just commentary. It was a call to remember. He reminded the world that respect is not built in victory, it's built in how you handle loss. His words cut through the noise because they carried something the internet rarely values anymore: sincerity. In both Hollywood and sports, redemption begins the same way, not in statements or interviews, but in quiet action, in showing up when it's easier to disappear, in owning mistakes without turning them into performances. That's the kind of strength that can't be measured in followers or views. It's the kind that rebuilds trust one person at a time. The lesson these scandals force us to face is simple but profound. The problem isn't just with the people in the spotlight, it's with a culture that demands perfection and celebrates destruction. Confession has become content, and vulnerability is strategy. Real humanity doesn't perform. It simply exists, flawed, learning, and resilient. The audience, too, carries responsibility. We scroll, comment, and share, shaping the world we live in. We can choose a world that punishes endlessly or one that allows growth. A world that devours people for mistakes, or one that lets them evolve beyond them. If every story ends with downfall, what's left to believe in? If every hero is doomed to fall, why do we keep searching for them? The courage now is not in staying perfect, but in staying real and choosing truth over image, empathy over outrage. The scandals we witness today, from Hollywood to the NBA, aren't just stories about individuals. They are mirrors, not the cold, polished kind that reflect only our appearances, but mirrors that reflect the deepest currents of our society. Our curiosity, our cruelty, our relentless need for distraction, and our hunger for meaning. In these reflections, we see ourselves not as we wish to be seen, but as we truly are. The fascination with scandal, the viral outrage, the ephemeral highs of a trending moment. These are not just moments in the lives of others. They are, in truth, moments in our own lives, revealed back to us with unflinching clarity. We watch, we judge, we comment, and we consume, yet rarely do we pause to consider why. Why does a single misstep, a whispered rumor, or a leaked recording captivate us so? Perhaps because somewhere beneath the layers of social media noise and flashing headlines, these stories touch something fundamentally human. They remind us of our own fragility, of our own mistakes, of the delicate threads of dignity and reputation that we hold so dear. And in watching others fall, we confront the uncomfortable truth that we are all susceptible to exposure, to judgment, to moment of public scrutiny that can feel like invisible yet suffocating chains. Even in this age of chaos and constant exposure, there is hope. Not the dramatic, cinematic hope that arrives with triumphant music and crowds cheering, but the quiet, resilient kind, the kind that grows slowly, almost imperceptibly from within. It starts as a small seed in the heart, the whisper that maybe, just maybe, survival is not about the applause or the validation of the crowd, but about the integrity of one's own choices. It is a hope that rebuilds from the inside out, brick by brick, moment by moment. And it endures because it is nourished not by recognition, but by conviction. Somewhere behind the endless headlines, the carefully curated clips, and the viral tweets designed to ignite our outrage, there are real people. People who wake up each day with the weight of judgment pressing down on them. People who navigate the impossible balance between public expectation and private reality. These are individuals learning to live without the illusion of perfection, discovering that the path to wholeness is rarely found in the adoration of others, but in the acceptance of oneself. They learn that mistakes do not define them, that scandals do not annihilate their essence, and that the fleeting applause of the masses is no measure of their worth. This is where the true story begins, Not in the fall, not in the viral headlines, not in the collective gasp of a captivated audience. It begins in the quiet moments of decision. Choosing to rise again when no one is watching. Choosing to confront one's vulnerabilities instead of hiding them. Choosing truth over spectacle. It is in these moments, invisible to the world but monumental in significance, that real transformation occurs. The lights will fade, the noise will die, and the audience will move on. But for those who have endured the storm, the lesson remains. Fame may expose you, scandal may break you, but the quiet, patient, and unshakable force of truth is what ultimately sustains you. Truth is not loud. It does not demand attention, nor does it need validation. It works in silence, steadily, persistently, reshaping the foundation of one's life from the inside. While the world clamors for the next viral sensation, the next dramatic downfall, the next instant judgment, truth endures quietly, with the slow inevitability of a river carving its path through stone. It teaches patience, humility, and resilience, virtues that scandal, gossip, or temporary fame could never impart. And there is a strange beauty in witnessing this quiet resilience. It is a kind of beauty that escapes cameras and headlines, the beauty of someone learning to live authentically despite the glare of public scrutiny. It is a strength of rebuilding not for show, but for survival, not for applause, but for authenticity, not to regain popularity, but to reclaim one's life. This is a lesson we often overlook, distracted as we are by spectacle, yet it is perhaps the most profound lesson of all, that the human spirit, when guided by truth and resilience, cannot be broken by temporary misfortune or fleeting judgment. The world thrives on narratives of collapse, on stories of failure, on the satisfaction of witnessing someone else's unraveling. But real life, the life that continues beyond the headlines, is not lived in viral moments. It is lived in the slow, deliberate choices that define character. The decision to apologize when wrong, to forgive oneself when necessary, to embrace imperfection, and confront challenges with courage rather than despair. These choices are quiet, often invisible, but they matter infinitely more than the outrage of a transient audience. Consider for a moment the countless individuals who have been thrust into public scrutiny through no fault of their own. Celebrities, public figures, or even ordinary people whose lives have been caught in the unforgiving lens of social media. Their missteps are magnified, their vulnerabilities exploited, their humanity reduced to sensational headlines. Yet, beneath it all, they continue to live, to hope, and to rebuild. They discover that their worth is not measured by the fleeting judgment of strangers, but by their own capacity to endure, to learn, and to grow. And in doing so, they offer us a lesson far more valuable than any scandal. That life is not about perfection, but about perseverance. Not about fame, but about fidelity to one's own truth. This understanding transforms the way we perceive the world around us. It teaches us empathy, humility, and the quiet dignity of resilience. It reminds us that everyone, no matter how public their life may be, is wrestling with challenges unseen. It encourages us to look beyond the surface, to seek depth instead of spectacle, to value character over charisma. And perhaps most importantly, it invites us to reflect on our own lives, how we respond to judgment, how we navigate failure, how we cultivate hope in the face of chaos. Hope, after all, is not a grand announcement or a viral sensation. It is not dependent on validation or applause. It is a steady heartbeat that persists when the world turns away, the inner flame that refuses to be extinguished, the quiet force that reshapes despair into strength. And in witnessing others embrace this hope, we are reminded that it exists within ourselves as well. We can learn, like them, to rise again, not for anyone else, but for the integrity of our own lives. So yes, the mirrors of our culture reflect much that is uncomfortable. They reveal our fascination with scandal, our appetite for distraction, and our tendency toward judgment. But they also reveal our capacity for understanding, compassion, and growth. And it is in this duality, the exposure of our flaws alongside the demonstration of resilience, that the real story unfolds. The story is not about the fall. It is about the rise, the quiet determination, the enduring hope that persists when all else fades. In the end, the lights dim, the cameras stop rolling, and the world moves on. But the lessons remain. The quiet truth, the patient hope, the resilience forged in adversity. These endure. They remind us that fame can be fleeting, scandals can be sensational, but the human spirit, when nurtured by truth, cannot be broken. It is a lesson written not in headlines, but in the lived experiences of those who have dared to rise again, not for recognition, but for themselves. And so, we are left with a choice. We can continue to be drawn into the spectacle, swept up by the ephemeral and the sensational, Or we can pause, reflect, and recognize the deeper currents that run beneath the noise. We can seek truth, cultivate resilience, and honor the quiet, enduring hope that exists within us all. This is a story worth telling. Not the scandal, not the fall, but the remarkable, unglamorous, deeply human act of rising again when no one is watching. Because in the end, it is not the applause of the audience, nor the shock of a scandal, nor the glare of exposure that defines us. It is the choices we make in the silence, the integrity we hold when tested, the hope we nurture in the darkness, and the quiet truth that patiently and unshakably guides us toward redemption, meaning, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.